Hey everybody, this is This Week at City Hall, and I'm Mayor Outlaw. And we have Mark Sandvigen with the American Legion, and we have Claudia Houston with Bern Historical. And I'm going to let you guys just go ahead, and we're going to talk about cemeteries today and our loved ones and the need for being respectful and doing a lot of projects and things. And then after the projects are completed, the security and the future maintenance. So let's go ahead and get started. Mark?
Well, we got started with this when we restored the World War I monument back in 2019. That was the 100th anniversary of the American Legion. And what we found was that there were 16 people who were left off the monument. 7 of them were black, 9 of them were white. And I don't think it was intentional. I think what happened was this was a subscription-based monument, and many people back then just didn't have the discretionary income to be able to put somebody's name on a monument. So we got the idea that maybe there were other veterans, especially black veterans, who might not have been included on, say, the World War I, Korean, or even World War II or Vietnam monuments over here in the courthouse square. And so we went to Greenwood Cemetery, and what we found was not just the fact that there were people that might or might not have been remembered, but what we found was a lot of headstones that were just really suffering from neglect. They were literally black with overgrowth of lichen and moss and just dirt and grime for over 100 years. And so we put together a project to clean the headstones to see who these individuals really were. We started out with a small list of about 141, and ultimately, even yesterday, we found yet another one. So we are now up to 63 black veterans who have now had their headstones cleaned and were remembered during Veterans Week.
Great. Claudia?
Well, I became involved with the American Legion through that memorial project. And one of the things I do as a historian, I love doing research. And I'm very good at genealogy and looking for things and families. And that's what I'm about. I don't care about the cannons, I don't care about the calibers, the guns and all that. I know people do, and that's fine. But I want to know, who are the people that lived here? Where did they come from? Who were their families? What happened when they came home? And so we had that successful project, and when Mark started this, he called me and said, well, how would you like to do some research on the Civil War veterans? And there were 6 that are buried there at Greenwood. They were all part of the United States Colored Troops. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, great, I'll start doing that. And then he called, another famous phone call. They said, well, we're up to 60 names. How would you like to do that? And honestly, I love doing that, but it's very time consuming. Some of it is simple because it's a family that's well known and we have enough history here. And some of it, where did you come from? Where did this person come from? How did they get to New Bern? Why are they buried in New Bern? So there's lots of different answers to those questions, and it takes a while, but some of the graves, Mark was showing me, he was just showing me where somebody was, and we looked down and he said, oh my gosh, here's another one. Well, within a small area, there were 3 brothers that were buried right there, and they were all in World War II.
And to the public, this is just a great idea, 2 organizations partnering together, because we have so many volunteer groups, and so many times we find that when we all are partnering, we get so much more done. Mm-hmm. Tell us one thing quick, Mark, is that a lot of times people are well-meaning, but they'll go out and they might just get a group of friends and go out and do some cleaning, and they use the wrong product and do more damage than good. Have you run into that? Or?
Yes, we did. In fact, one of the things that we were hard over on is the American Legion. We worked with Arlington National Cemetery. And Arlington said, this is what we use, this is how you properly maintain these headstones. And what we didn't realize is that these headstones don't belong to us. They're government property. So in order to maintain government property, they wanted us to use the correct products and everything else. So the American Legion funded this, and we got all these little cleaning kits, and we gave them to all the volunteers who came out, and we taught them how to literally clean all of this stuff. And I have been working with, Colleen Roberts, and there are pictures of the before and after, and it is just absolutely miraculous. One, the before is just, as black as your hat, and the after is this bright and shiny marble that just really pays, I think, tribute to the veteran.
Mm-hmm. So, any other surprises that either one of you found?
We certainly did. I think certainly Claudia has some, but let me lead into Claudia, and then she can kind of tell you about these guys beforehand. One of the things that we found were, and Mr. Mayor, it was fabulous. These are things you only read about in history books. One is a gentleman that Claudia will talk about by the name of Mumford, and he was part of what was called the Student Army Training Corps. And the Student Army Training Corps in World War I, there was no U.S. Army up until World War I. And when John Pershing established the U.S. Army, one of the things they needed was officers. And W.E.B. Du Bois went to President Wilson and said, look, we need black officers for black troops. And so what they did was they established the very beginnings of Army ROTC. And this young man went there. And he either went to Scott or he went to Biddle. He went to one of the historically black colleges or universities at the time, and that's where he got his education. Claudia will talk more about him. There was another gentleman that just absolutely, I was floored. I was cleaning a headstone, and there was this thing underneath my kneecap, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I thought it might have been a stone. And I brushed away all this old grass and everything else, and here was this headstone. And it's a young man by the name of Anderson, and Anderson was part of the famed 92nd. And the 92nd is an unbelievable group because John Pershing couldn't put black troops with American soldiers. He gave them to the French. And so the 92nd is this famed group. They're probably one of the most decorated divisions in our U.S. Army history. And because they wore U.S. Army uniforms, but they wore the French helmet, their patch was changed from the Buffalo Soldiers to the blue helmets. And so to this day, they're known as the blue helmets. Mm-hmm. And they have this incredible history. And he's in our graveyard. Mm-hmm. Here's a young man who went to France, and he's in our graveyard. He's not not in Arlington, he's not in, Hoboken or whatever, he's here.
So Claudia, how about that? How did he do you know how he got here, and was he from New Bern? Or?
Well, it's pretty amazing. He actually was born in Maysville, but his dad died when he was 7, and his mom moved to New Bern, so they became a New Bern family. And from the time he was little, what's listed in every census and everything is that he was a baker. And it turns out after he came home from the war, he's listed, he worked at Kiefer Bakery. Mm-hmm. And all through his history, a baker. And he married a gal from New Bern. And in talking with Mark about it, it's always the 92nd, but I'm sure, I could find his transportation to France. You can find that online, what ship they took from Hoboken. And I said, they probably had him as a baker. Mark said, no. Because when he went to France, it was in the middle of the Meuse-Argonne, that whole 100-day war. The French were desperate for fighting men. So when they enabled the 92nd to fight with them, they all had been trained. When they went, no matter what your position was, you still had to be trained in combat and training. They were just shoving people out on the front line, mm-hmm. and they were dying by the thousands. Mm. So we don't know, but in all likelihood, he was not baking. He was on the lines, we're pretty sure. So it's one of those things, if we could find current family members, they very much may know that story. Mm-hmm. We don't right now, but hopefully we'll find out.
So what all wars are represented in Greenwood that you found? Sounds like
everything. We actually have service from from 1862 on for the young black men who volunteered mm-hmm. to fight with the Union. We have those graves all the way up to the Gulf War. Every single war is represented.
Mm-hmm. And the most people from the list that we have are from World War II, which surprised me a little, but one of the graveyards was a name one of the gravestones was a name I recognized, and I contacted the relative. And she told me, she said, well, we wanted my dad to be buried at the National Cemetery, but we were told there was no more room. And I hadn't really thought about that, but that could be why there are so many at Greenwood, because there was no room at the National Cemetery.
So who all was helping, just the American Legion, veterans, or who all was involved in the cleaning and maintenance?
Oh, great question. Actually, first and foremost was the city of Newburgh. So we started out with Foster Hughes when he was director of Parks and Rec. He kicked everything off, and then he gave it to his successor, and then we were very, very lucky. You know, Carrie and Veronica Maddox, who is head of our cemetery, she was right there, you know, kind of every step of the way. So the city has just been our tremendous support. And then when we actually did the work, one of the dreams that I've always had is the vice president of the Veterans Council is I've always wanted to get all the veterans groups involved. So when we did the flag placement on Veterans Day week, we had the Army, who was represented by the Military Officers Association of America. That was Chaplain Will Barnes. Then we had the president of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. We ended up with the Vietnam Veterans of America, who provided all the flags for the graves. We ended up with the VFW Post 2514 over here just outside of Grantham. Then we ended up with Post 539. And we ended up with the Disabled American Veterans as well. So every single group was represented. And then we actually ended up with veterans who came who are not members of any of these veteran services organizations. They just wanted to pay their respects, and they did so as well. So it blossomed into something we could not have expected.
Well, great. Well, this segment of This Week at City Hall is about the end. So if you both would just kind of recap for a minute or so whatever you would like to say and about New Bern Historical Society or American Legion. So Claudia, go ahead.
Sure. Well, I want to echo something that you said. Like, we very much like to partner with other community groups. The history here is all of our history. Doesn't matter where you come from in New Bern or where your roots are. So we love this type of project. What struck me was the difference in looking at the gravestones, and you can actually read them and see them, and then look at them and say, wait a minute, this person lived here and died here. And what do we know? We want to know about them. They deserve to be recognized. And so finding out their history, I think, is really, really important. And I'll continue to do that. But also, I think what would be wonderful is if we can, just like we did with the Memorial Project, find some family members that are still here that maybe have pictures and maybe have remnants of things or remember stories that their grandfather told or whatever. So we'll continue till we get to now these all 63 graves.
Okay.
And I think the thing that struck me the most is that the veterans don't bury themselves. The families were the ones who ordered the headstones, and it is the families who recognize that these people served a great country, and they did so for various and sundry reasons. They all served, and it was their families who wanted them remembered as a veteran. Whether or not they wanted to be remembered as a veteran, we don't know. But it was certainly their families that did. And for those 63, we're very, very thankful.
Well, we're going to end it, but I do want to give you a little bit of history because I want folks in New Bern to be so immersed in history. I actually worked at Masonic Theater in high school, and we had a World War I veteran, Mr. Fulcher, that used to come in, and Mr. Kafer's Bakery was my boss at Masonic Theater. And this is, folks, getting on back there, this is about 1969, and I was in high school. And, Mr. Kafer just was so in awe of World War I veterans because there was getting to where there weren't many left. And he always treated Mr. Fulcher with such high esteem and respect. And so you know, then we see that now with World War II veterans, and it won't be long before it'll be veteran Vietnam and Korea. And so, you know, we can't spend enough time lifting up those that give us the opportunity to live in the freest country, the safest country in the world. So this week from City Hall, thanks for being with us.